It's been 20 years now since the Jelly Bean Bandits first made their mark on American music. On this anniversary, we decided it would be a very good thing to trace back the Jelly Bean Bandits and to find out how much of an impact they really have made over the last 20 years, to see what remains of their music and of their memories and of the brilliant album they made in 1967, their debut and only album. An album some casually dismissed as being just another attempt to cash in, and others treasure as a milestone of music making. Sir, we're doing a documentary on the legendary Jelly Bean Bandits. This is 20 years later. Would you mind identifying yourself for the audience?
I'm Richard Hinman. I'm postmaster at Vales Gate.
Uh-huh. Now, see if you recognize this photo. And after you look at it, hold up for the camera so we can join in with you. Okay, let me zero in on that.
I can't say I recognize him, but he might be like one of these fellows that got up on the posters in the board in the lobby.
Ah, yeah, that could be him. Actually, he's a musician, but a lot of times they're pretty similar, aren't they?
Somewhat, especially with the garb and the bandolier and so on. You can't say that I know who he is.
Continuing on our search for the legendary Jelly Bean Bandits, what remains of them and their music brings us to this house in Middle Hope.
What the hell is this? Don't you people realize that some people work at night?
Excuse me, sir. We're doing a documentary on the legendary Jelly Bean Bandits. I want you to...
Jelly who?
Take a look at this album, please, sir, and examine the cover carefully.
Oh my God. Who are these people?
Do you recognize any of them?
This guy up here looks like a pretty sleazy character, this guy here.
Uh-huh. Okay.
What's his name?
I'm not quite sure, but they told me they were very famous about 20 years ago.
Boy, I'm telling you, I don't know. Yeah.
And also...
As a matter of fact, I think you got a point there.
Yes?
Yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, these guys robbed the train I was on once.
Is that right?
Yeah. I remember them now. Yeah, they robbed the train I was on once.
You know, it's interesting because the last person I showed the album cover to was the postmaster down at Vales Gate, and he recognized the drummer as being on the board there. So
on the what?
On the bulletin board in the post office is his photo.
Well, that's I can see that right now. You know, as a matter of fact, I was down in Marlboro, New York, not too long ago, and I saw this guy. This guy right down, he was down there.
That's the one that was on the post office in the Vales Gate post office. Yeah, that's the very same one. Yeah.
Yeah. He was down there. I don't know. He was standing on the street corner, walking around saying, "Where's Mikey? Where's Mikey?" I couldn't understand what the hell he was talking about.
Well, actually, what I think it was back then, they wrote all the material in the album. They wrote, and a couple songs that are very spacey, like one called "Poor Precious Dreams," and they used to write a lot of lyrics that made no sense whatsoever, but they were big with the acid heads, so I think that's what sold the album, actually.
They were big with the who?
The acid heads. People used to take stuff to make them see things.
Oh.
And the same people nowadays are still dropping stuff, except now it's, you know, X-Lax and things like that, but back then it was...
Oh, you mean those hippies?
Yes, those
well, I see.
Dirty, long-haired hippie types.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, you know, I heard this album a couple of times. And they got some real good songs on here.
Well, I'm glad that you remember, sir, and I want to thank you for your time, and I'm sure that our viewing audience will enjoy this documentary immensely.
And, gee whiz, you know, this is quite nice. It'd even be nicer if you people showed up at a reasonable hour.
We're filming a documentary on the legendary Jelly Bean Bandits. Are you familiar with the group whatsoever?
No, I'm not.
Okay, probably you're a much younger lady. You weren't around back then when they played at places like the Buccaneer, etc. I want you to pick up that photograph, hold it to the camera for about a minute or two, or second or two, and just look at it. Okay. Now let me zoom in on that photograph. Okay. Now I want you to take a good look at that photograph. Okay. That was the lead singer. He's considered a very macho type back then. Do you think you would have dated somebody like that?
No.
Would you have gone out to a nightclub to see somebody like that?
Probably not.
Well, do you think you would be interested in this kind of music?
It could be, yeah.
That was big back in 1967 in Dutchess
All right.
County.
So if it was big, probably I would have gone.
Just continue on. We're filming a documentary here on the legendary Jelly Bean Bandits who played in Dutchess County about 20 years ago. Back in the late 60s, what were you doing back then?
I was married and
She was in high school.
raising small children.
Back in the late 60s.
The late
Did
60s.
take a look at this album cover. Are you familiar with this band whatsoever?
No, I never saw them before in my life.
Are you originally from this area?
Yes, I am.
And did you remember the Buccaneer nightclub back then?
No.
And you're not familiar, you didn't dance to those guys' material, their songs weren't your songs, none of that.
No, none of these.
Okay, would you pass it over to the, oh, he's leaving. Would you mind coming back here, sir? Well,
No, I was never, I was really never out in those days, so
uh-huh.
it was a little bit later than that. Jerry,
Oh, bring Jerry over. Jerry, we want to ask you a question. Do you remember this band?
I don't remember the band. I recognize one guy. The
Would
rest of
you?
the guys are from Mexico, right?
Yes,
They're
they're
all
not Los
Mexican.
Lobos though. A lot of people have said that, but they're not Los Lobos really.
You remember? Look, you recognize this fellow? Not him? Look at this.
A lot of people confuse this. It's the nose actually,
He was
but
handsome then.
yeah, that guy has he doesn't have any gray in his hair whatsoever. I get gray hair, so
Yes,
it's
sir,
not
it
the
is.
same person.
Do you recognize him?
that is.
That's Mr. Doctor himself when he was young and handsome.
Is that actually
The
you?
Jelly Bean Bandits.
See, did you actually follow this group? Did you go out to where they were having a good time?
I never heard of it ever.
Never?
No. I heard of that. What's that band with the fellow that works for you?
Oh, the Go.
The Go band, I know.
Right. Now this
I
is
heard
this.
Good Times band.
Ah, that's right.
And there's a real well-known band today
Oh,
in
it doesn't-
Newburgh
you sound like
that
you're
the
in
same
trouble
fellow
again.
plays with. What's the name of that band?
Diamond Head.
Diamond Head.
That's
Picked
the-
the number one or something.
That's
like
the
that.
one. Would you allow your daughters to go out with people who look like that?
No, I definitely would refrain them from going out anyone looks like this.
What?
Would you allow people into your nightclub, birdies, that look like that?
I won't let them in birdies.
No, you wouldn't let them
Look like
birdies?
that either, no.
Okay.
Are you
Well,
just
this is Main Town, Main Street, Poughkeepsie. And in search for our documentary, we find ourselves outside the Poughkeepsie Journal building. This is the big daily newspaper in Dutchess County where the Buccaneer used to be until it burned down several years ago. We're going to see if we can trace anyone who remembers the Jelly Bean Bandits here. We're filming a documentary on the legendary Jelly Bean Bandits, and we're here at the Poughkeepsie Journal newsroom and talking to, well, there goes Tony
Johnny,
DeBarris, one of
no.
the music people. Tony, you can get back over here.
Come in here.
And
Wait, is this for
Carol
television?
Trapani.
No.
Now, are you familiar at all with the legendary Jelly Bean Bandits?
Yes, I am.
Are you? And Carol?
Unfortunately, no.
Really? Well, take a good look at this cover now. Back in 1967, they were very big at the Buccaneer. Would you have dated people who looked like that back then?
No.
Okay. Now, I have a question for Tony, since he's familiar with the group and the album. Many people have said that the record itself holds up well on a sort of a par level with the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper, etc. I want your honest opinion now.
Well, I think the Jelly Bean Bandits, is this their debut record?
They're one and only.
One and only, yeah. I think this album ranks up at the top
He means it
albums of the last 20, 30 years. It's right up there with Abbey Road, Born to Run, all those. I mean, especially the song Another August Revisited. It's a very pretty ballad of gentle love. Features Billy and the great performances he was capable of. So You know, I just think it's really great stuff.
I thank you very much for your opinion. I'm glad that you're still familiar and everybody remembers the Bandits. And again, just remember that this is a very rare album, one of a kind, and unfortunately the Bandits didn't continue on after this.
Pity.
Yeah, it was a shame. They were at the height of their career and it just all fell apart.
Well, you heard about the famous show they did with Jimi Hendrix. You know,
I've been trying to get the video.
Hendrix stormed off stage because you know, they were just so good that he couldn't bear with going on stage and following them.
That's true. There's a rumor that there is one copy of the video around. I'm not quite sure who has it.
Well,
but,
I hear the estate of Hendrix has refused to let it be released.
That's probably what happened. It's tied up intestate. It wouldn't actually be fair to continue on this documentary without going back to the first radio station to play the legendary music of the legendary Jelly Bean Bandits back in 1967. It's right here at WHVW, Hyde Park, that Dave Fitch, the legendary disc jockey, first discovered, played, and gave support to the Jelly. The documentary to trace the steps of the Jelly Bean Bandits over the last 20 years brings us to WHVW in Hyde Park, the first station to play the Jelly Bean Bandits album. We're here with a fellow named Ken Gagne. Ken, do you remember a DJ named Dave Fitch?
There's been so many DJs. I really don't remember Dave all that well, but since I talked to you and you asked me to kind of take a look around and see if there was, I came across in the archives of this revered broadcast house right here, this beautiful station that we have here in Hyde Park. I went through the archives and I came up with a little interesting bit of information. I came up with this picture right here. And I'd like to read it. It has stuff on the back of it to read. It's like a postcard.
Okay.
And I'd like to read this right now. I think this is shocking. It says, "Dear Davy Pooh," and I understand that's what he was called, Davy Pooh. "Dear Davy Pooh, I'll never forget the night you took me up in the control room. Golly," it says here. "I never knew it was an FCC rule that you had to broadcast in the nude, including your guest, Love Fawn." Fawn, it says here. Love Fawn. I think this is shocking and obscene behavior, and it is not an FCC rule that you must broadcast in the nude. It's a choice of yours. If you want to broadcast in the nude, you can. If you don't want to and you want to wear your clothes, it's all right too. This is shocking and obscene, I think.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ken Gagne, for setting the record straight, and do have a nice day now.
You too, and...
Continuing on our documentary, tracing the last 20 years of the Jelly Bean Bandits, we come upon this gentleman, the world-famous Professor Ed McCarthy, who is a musician, a photographer, and who personally knew the Bandits and actually works part-time on occasion for one of the Jelly Bean Bandit members. Could I bother you, Mr. McCarthy?
Oh, hey, how you doing? Hey. Aren't you that guy that goes around the city, ugly, what's his name?
No, I didn't ask you to take your clothes off yet.
Okay.
Wrong one.
What can I do for you?
We were told by reliable sources that you remember the Jelly Bean Bandits.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, that one of the guys you work for part-time is a former bandit. Is that true?
Oh, yeah, old, what's-his-face?
Oh, what's-his-face, right, the old wino.
Yeah.
Well, we have this picture that we got from 20 years back, and this is of your boss 20 years ago. Supposedly, this was how he got his ideas way back when. Is that true?
Yeah, very good possibility.
You want to hold up the camera? We'll take a good look at it.
Looks a little like the guy that owns the diner in Marlboro.
That's true. And is that how he actually stimulated his thoughts and his creative abilities?
Yeah, well, it's hard to tell in a still photograph. You know, he'd do it by, massaging the back of his head like this.
Sort of a Chinese technique.
Yeah. He learned that while the group he was in, the Jelly Bean Bandits, were on tour in China.
I remember it well. The live album, I think I have one copy of it.
Well, I have a couple of bootleg copies of the Jelly Bean Bandits live in China.
I
hear there's a resurgence in their popularity in the area.
Yep, it must be the 20-year anniversary, like with the Beatles and the other groups.
Yeah. So I'm going to start making copies and selling it at all rock concerts.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, I thank you for your time. Continuing on with the 20 years of the Jelly Bean Bandits, the history of a historic rock and roll group. We're down here in Action Audio speaking to a gentleman named Don. Are you familiar with the group?
Sure am. Used to watch them for years and years.
Ah, yes. A very historic group. Now, they made a number of videos. One was the Jelly Bean Bandits live at Shea Stadium. Do you still have copies of that around?
We did, but as popular as it is, it's gone even as we speak.
20 years later, the mystique still holds up.
It still does. Every time we get it in, it goes right back out the door. You can't keep it in the place.
Amazing. And I don't think the band itself really realizes how much drawing power they still have.
Yeah, Billy's still popular. What are you going to do?
Right. And then, well, I know what the rest of the band is doing right now, and very diverse habits, very diverse interest.
And Billy is about as diverse as you can get.
You've got that right, sir. Anything else you'd like to add to the information about the mystique of the Jelly Bean Bandits, even 20 years later?
Absolutely.
Continuing on with our documentary of the historic Jelly Bean Bandits, 20 years later. Ladies and gentlemen, right now we're at Windsor Highway, Sunoco. I'm speaking to the owner, manager, chief here, Jack Graziano. And do you remember these guys, Jack?
Oh, yes I do. Yes I do. They used to have 2 limousines. We used to take care of them for him all the time. And sure, he's had a white one. He spoke on both sides at the same time, a white one and a black one on this side. Yep, I remember him.
And did they tip well, by the way?
These people were phenomenal with tipping. They usually come in with baseball bats and clubs, and they get their way one way or another.
Uh-huh. Was there ever any, let's say, liquor or booze or women in the back of these?
Liquor or booze, that was in the front.
That was in the front, okay. And was there any strange women in there?
Well, as I remember, they used to play the roles with women. They used to have the dresses on. The women used to sit in the back with pants.
Ah. Made for an interesting group, huh?
Yes, they were. Yes, they were.
You realize that 20 years later, they're still as popular, influential as always?
Especially around here. Yes, they are.
Well,
we keep their tapes inside the shop. We listen to them every single day.
I think that's wonderful, and I want to thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Continuing on, filming the documentary on the legendary Jelly Bean Bandits. This is where they got the start, 20 years ago. This is the trade winds as it looks today. Not quite the same. No marquee, just a little thing saying it's Wiener, Ryder, Lowe, Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. It's a business. It's an office building. It's a rainy day. I'm getting wet. But I'm stupid. I'll stay out here and do this videotape anyway. The documentary we're filming on the phenomenal Jelly Bean Bandits on the 20th anniversary continues. We're here with the former owner of the Trade Winds and of the Buccaneer, where the Bandits got their start, Mr. Frank Peterzak. How are you doing today, Frank?
Fine.
And we want to ask you a couple questions. This is a photograph of one of the guys in the band. Take a good look at it, and hold it up to the camera so we can zoom in on it. Now, that was supposedly the lead guitarist, Jack Doherty. And they tell me he was very macho, dressed like that at the Trade Winds. Is that true?
That is correct.
The women went for the men with the helmets on?
I think so.
And big feathers?
Definitely.
And didn't you tell me at one time you saw him in the parking lot with a feather going back and forth in the top of a convertible? Is that true?
Right. That is true.
And wasn't it on a day like today that the water supply overflowed in your parking lot, 4 in the morning, and everybody was out swimming in your parking lot?
Including myself, yes.